Come on in. I'm just checking the market. Well, it's down a little bit, but Tesla's up a little bit. All right, we'll take it. Grab a seat, get a beverage. We're ready for the show you've been waiting for. The best thing that ever happened to you. But first, I'm going to make sure I can see your comments. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom. All right, perfect. Almost ready. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the highlight of human civilization. It's called Coffee with Scott Adams, and you've never had a better time. But if you'd like to take a chance on raising your experience up to levels that nobody can even understand with their tiny, shiny human brains, all you need for that is a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel. Oh, no, a copper mug or a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, a canteen, jug or flask, a vessel of any kind. How could I get that wrong? I mean, seriously, how could I get that wrong? All right, fill it with your favorite liquid. I like coffee. Join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine of the day, the thing that makes everything better, except me talking. And it happens now. Go. That was older coffee than I was hoping for. All right, I got to take a drink of some water. That was the worst coffee I ever put in my mouth. God. Ugh. All right. Well, let's check the science news. You'll never guess this one. SciPost has an article that says that people with children report lower romantic love, intimacy, and passion. Did they really need to do a study to find out that people with children have lower romantic love, intimacy, and passion? They could have just asked me or anyone who's ever been around any child ever. I'm pretty sure we all knew that, right? Or let me put it another way. If you could be in a room alone with children and you were feeling feelings of romantic love, intimacy, and passion, I don't want you around my children. You know what I mean? So I think there's a fairly logical reason why being around children turns off those emotions, at least for most people. We don't know about Epstein, but for everybody else. Let's see, we got another science thing. According to Interesting Engineering, your heating may soon come from a data center. You know how data centers use a lot of electricity, but they also create a lot of heat, and that heat has to go somewhere. So you can either pipe it into the atmosphere, total waste of heat, or you can pipe it into homes and indoor swimming pools and stuff like that. How many of you remember that several years ago I did a little project with Bill Pulte in which we were designing sort of the ideal city? And one of the concepts was to build a small city around a data center. And it was for that very reason. So you'd want to have a small nuclear generator for the city, but also for the data center. And then you want to use that warmth that comes from it to heat your homes. And I imagine that that designed city would be a profit center, so that you would literally design it so that some big company like Google would pay to use your data center, and they would pay for all your electricity from your small futuristic nuclear power plant, and then the city would need no taxes because as long as they were generating sort of income from having an awesome setup, you would need no taxes. So, how about that? Um, so I think that's going to happen. Well, in the world of robots, you didn't ask, but I've got the answer. In the world of robots, uh, I keep seeing stories where they try to make a robot with human or human-like muscles. So apparently, if you design your robot muscles with human type organs, you can make it pretty strong and responsive. And now MIT has figured out, according to interesting engineering, how to get your robot to be let's see, way stronger than a mechanical robot, and it increases the force output by 30 times, and it's a biohybrid. So it's not exactly a what do you call it when it's part human, part robot? Cyborg. It's not exactly a cyborg, but it would have human-like or animal-like muscles. Now, let me ask you this: how weird would it be to have a robot that had human-like muscles on the outside? Wouldn't that be super creepy? Or are you going to want to have sex with it? Or would you not want to have sex with it if there were childlike robots in the room? So many questions. So many questions. Well, the big news, which I'm not up to date on. Oh, damn it! My I changed the ink in my printer, and it still can't print. So it has smushed all of my documents into a terribly, well, you can't see it, but what is causing that? If it's a brand new ink cartridge. If anybody knows what's causing that, let me know so I can fix it. Anyway, the pipe bomber from January 6th, you remember the pipe bomber, has been allegedly arrested. They know who it is. Um, but do you remember it wasn't long ago that the news was, which probably was fake news, was that it was a woman. And there was a lot of chatter that the pipe bomber was a woman. Do you know why? Do you know why I knew it wasn't a woman? Because it was a pipe bomb. Would you ever make a bet? Let's say I came to you and said, "Hey, I want you to place a bet." There was a person who planted a bomb, and it was a pipe bomb. Probably had to make it themselves. Was it a man or a woman? How much money would you bet that it was a man who planted the pipe bomb? Well, I think I would have bet a pretty large amount. In fact, the least likely possibility was that a pipe bomber is a woman. So you can ask yourself this: if you were ever thinking that that story was true, that a woman planted a pipe bomb, you should probably stop saying things in public for the rest of your life. The odds of a woman planting a pipe bomb still very close to zero. I mean, it's possible. She could have been paid to do it or something like that. But women and bombs, no, no, don't see it. Not in this country. But I do wonder if this is the beginning of what we will call the lone wolf narrative. When they say they caught the person, does that suggest that they're going to say it was just one person with some idea that was just their own? Do you believe that the pipe bomber, be it male or female, do you believe that the pipe bomber could have possibly been acting alone? Does that seem likely? It's possible. If it's a guy, especially. Yeah. If it was a woman, there's not a slightest chance that the woman was working alone. There definitely was a man involved, even if it was only to make the bomb and hand it to her and say, go put this over there. But it feels like we're going to be told it's a lone wolf. Are you going to believe that? Now, maybe the FBI believes that, but I don't know. This doesn't really have the lone wolf vibe to it, does it? It feels like it's a little bit bigger conspiracy wise, but it's a brand new story. Fog of war. We don't even know if they got the right person, but I guess we'll find out more today. Well, Megyn Kelly is reporting that the FDA is preparing to add what they call a black box warning to the COVID vaccines for children. And the idea here is that I guess Alex Berenson's been doing the base reporting on this. And he says he's been reliably informed that there will be an FDA black box warning. Now, the black box warning is sort of the most dangerous thing that they could say about a product. It would still be on the market, but the black box warning would be, well, watch out, it could kill you. Now, how many of you think this is new news? Because it's presented as new. Didn't we know since the middle of the pandemic? Didn't we always know that it was dangerous for young people, especially men? Boys, I guess. Boys. Haven't we known that? So the only thing I can imagine that was added was maybe some new statistics about how dangerous it is. But we've always known, at least I have. Did you not know? And I'm not talking about what we suspected. I thought we knew for sure that it was more danger than benefit for young boys, especially. Am I wrong about that? Like, why does this feel like just Groundhog Day? Are we really just finding this out, or is the news that the FDA is agreeing with it for the first time? Is that the only thing that's new? I mean, it just feels like we've been on this road for years, and we all knew it for years. Anyway, now we'll find out more about that, I guess. In related news, RFK Jr. was saying that Pfizer had data about that their vaccine was not really a vaccine, meaning it didn't stop transmission. And they knew it 7 months before the injections went on the market. Do you believe that? So apparently there was some monkey study where the macaques. No, I'm not. I know that sounded naughty, but if you have any minors listening to this, could you cover their ears? Because I'm going to say the name of a type of monkey, but it's going to sound like I'm talking dirty. I won't be talking dirty at all. I'll just be naming a kind of monkey. You ready? Cover your children's ears. If you have a pet, cover their ears. The type of monkey is macaque. That's right. That's what those monkeys are, macaque. So if you put the virus in macaque, apparently if your if your monkey has a nose, like macaque does, they found out that it had the same amount of virus in there as if they didn't get the vaccination. And so, in theory, at least for macaques, it showed that it didn't stop the spread at all. And allegedly, RFK Jr. says Pfizer knew that 7 months before it went on the market. Well, that would be pretty damning if that were true. But do I have it right that the big pharma companies have no liability risk? They don't, do they? Like, even if they knew, does that change their liability risk? Because this would seem to me like insanely criminal. You know, not just not just some kind of a civil thing you could do a lawsuit about, but it feels like it's just flat out criminal because they had a lot of money on the line, and they would have been knowingly killing people in large numbers, allegedly. right? I don't know what's true, but allegedly. It would be like the crime of the century. So I don't know. We'll find out more about that. Christy Nome said they've just discovered that 50% of the visas in Minnesota are fraudulent. 50%. Boy, Tim Walz is having a bad, bad month. The governor of Minnesota. Is Minnesota just the biggest criminal enterprise you've ever seen in your life? Remember when you thought all the sketchy stuff happened in Las Vegas or, maybe New York? No, turns out that Minnesota was quietly racking up the biggest criminal record of any state. Unbelievable. They don't have really a good news day ever lately. So 50% of the visas in this case would be the instrument for allowing you in the country. I'm not talking about MasterCard and Visa. That's a different visa. So that's happening. But luckily, there's nothing else illegal that's ever happened in Minnesota except that visa stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Mario Knopfel is reporting that apparently, although you and I know that there's been massive fraud uncovered in Minnesota, how many times do you think ABC, CBS, or NBC mentioned it or mentioned Tim Walz? The answer is nothing. Yeah. So the big three networks are sort of acting like this story doesn't exist. This is like one of the biggest stories of all time. Well, decided, no, we'll talk about something else instead. All right. Wow. None of those networks, this is what Mario Knopfel is saying on X, none of those networks have mentioned Walz by name in the past week. So I think what they did mention is that there were problems. So they may have mentioned the crime, but they didn't mention the governor's name even once. Okay. All right. And then, according to Wall Street Apes, a real good account you should follow on X, Wall Street Apes is reporting that investigations found that Somalians in Minnesota were caught early on stealing millions of dollars. But do you know why it didn't become a story? And do you know why they kept on stealing, even though they had been discovered? And apparently multiple people had discovered it and reported it. So it wasn't like there was one whistleblower. Apparently a lot of people were aware of it. And some number of people were reporting it and saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of money getting stolen here. Maybe we should do something about it. Why do you think nothing happened until recently? Do you think it had to do with DEI? Yes, it did. So apparently the Somalians were smart enough to say, if you cause trouble, we're gonna brand you as a big old racist, and we're gonna say that you're only reporting this as trouble because we're black, and you're a racist. And by the way, George Floyd did not have it coming. So I guess it was around the George Floydish time that people wanted to report this, but it was just sort of impossible. It was just politically impossible to make this damning accusation against a large population of black residents of the country. There just wasn't any way to do it. So people weren't willing to take the chance. So people did see it, they knew about it, and they did report it, but nothing happened until recently. Now, that would be one of the many advantages of having Trump as your president, because people have somewhat gotten past that. Not 100%, but I feel like we're in a more, I don't know, a more realistic world, a more common sense world, where you can actually say, oh yeah, it looks like we have a problem here. And you're not automatically the worst person in the world because you brought it up. All right, here's another accusation against Tim Walz. I'll tell you, he's just having the worst month. Now, I don't know if this is true, I'll just say it's an allegation. But I also saw this in the Wall Street Apes account on X, that apparently the men who worked with Tim Walz in the National Guard in Nebraska went to the FBI when Tim Walz was in the National Guard because they believed that Tim Walz had given classified military secrets to the Chinese government. Now, how certain would you have to be before you went to the FBI and turned in your fellow National Guardsmen for giving secrets to China? You would have to be really, really sure, wouldn't you? I mean, you don't have to be 100% sure, but you wouldn't do it if you just had a mild suspicion, would you? I mean, I feel like you'd have to have a pretty solid reason for even going there because remember, if you go to the FBI, you're putting your own life in a trajectory that's going to be a lot of trouble, right? Whether you're correct or whether you're incorrect, you're kind of donating your own freedom because you think it's important. So the one thing we can know with some degree of certainty is that the people who reported it, they must have thought it was serious. I don't think you would report that. I mean, it's just such an allegation. Would you report that unless you really thought you had the goods? Well, they did report it, and nothing happened. But the allegation is that there were some secret documents about a new tank that the United States was producing, and some of those documents allegedly disappeared. The plans for the tank, and that soon after, China, where Walz had a history of visiting quite often, that soon after China produced a tank that looked just like the one that had the stolen plans, and nobody knows where the plans went. Now, is that enough to say that Tim Walz did it? We only know that Tim Walz had a strong connection to China. We know that he had access to those plans. We know that his co soldiers believe that he might have been the one who stole them. And we know that the timing is such that China created the tank coincidentally, just like the one that had the stolen documents. Well, that's not proof of anything, but sort of suspicious. All right, what else happened? Also in Minnesota, I tell you, Minnesota is just this bed of crime. So the Minnesota director of elections, this guy named Paul Linnell, he admitted recently, and this is also a Wall Street Apes post, he admitted recently that all you need to vote in Minnesota is a driver's license, and all you need to do to get a driver's license is ask for one. I mean, you probably have to take a test like everybody else, but you don't need to be a citizen to get a driver's license. If you get a driver's license, apparently, let's see, it doesn't have to match your social security number, which could be fake. And if you try to register to vote, they will identify a fake social security number. But if you have a fake social security number, which they identify, so they know it's fake, but you have a real driver's license, which would be totally legal in Minnesota, they still let you vote. Even though they know your social security doesn't match a real social security number, they still let you vote. And that they admit that. Now, in the story, I didn't see how many people voted. I don't know if it's a big problem or a small one, but what the hell is wrong with Minnesota? They can't control. It's where I think wherever Tim Walz is, there's crime. It's like he's he's some sort of a attractor for major crime. That's what it feels like. Anyway, so they don't have control of their elections. They don't have control of their budget. They don't have control of their governor. What is wrong with you, Minnesota? Well, according to Patrick Byrne, Patrick Byrne, he was the CEO of Overstock and he's been in the news a lot talking about Venezuela and our election systems and allegations of problems that involve Venezuela and our elections. But he was doing an interview on Lindell TV, and his claim is that there are people on the Venezuelan payroll who still are inside the U.S. government, and that some of these names, and he knows who they are, he just can't tell us for various reasons. He's under oath not to name them for some reason, but that there are people who have a lot of seniority in some cases. So there might even be names that you've heard of that allegedly are literally just on the payroll of Venezuela, but they're part of our government. Now that's a hell of a claim, but we'll see. So I really don't have a way to form an independent opinion of whether the Patrick Byrne Venezuelan election stuff is true or not. Because how would I? I mean, if you ask me, does Patrick Byrne seem credible? I would say yes. Yes. Uh, I've communicated with him a number of times, and it seems credible. But I don't know that I'm smart enough or wise enough that I could tell the difference between something that seems credible and something that's true. It's very different. So remember, I always make a big deal about credible doesn't mean it's real. It just means you can't tell any reason that it looks fake, except that it's let's say in this case, the only thing that would be a flag would be a big story. And you expect big stories to spread, but they don't have to. They could stay as small, skeptical stories for a long time until they're not. So I really don't have an opinion about whether this is true. But the claim is that there are people of such seniority secretly on the payroll, it will shake this nation. So I guess he thinks we'll find out someday about that. He says, quote, "We have diaries. We have the witnesses. It's all documented." Well, that would be a hell of a thing if we have diaries and documents and people and all that. So we'll see. Well, in other news, I can barely read my notes. My printer just totally hashed them up. But in other news, let's see, back in April of 2024, just merely a year and a half ago, the prestigious journal Nature did a big study on climate change and how much damage it would cause by the end of the century. And wow, was it bad. Wow. So according to Nature, or a study that was in Nature, that climate change is going to get you. Oh, it's going to really mess up the whole country, the world. Update. They have retracted. They have retracted their big study and find that it had flaws, and they do not stand behind the idea that climate change is a huge existential threat. They're not saying it's not. They're just saying that that study that a lot of people had relied on was BS. So they retracted it. Do you remember, as others have pointed out, that Kamala Harris didn't really make a big deal about climate change, did she? Imagine you were Kamala Harris, you're running against Trump. Trump has said that climate change, or at least the way people want it funded, et cetera, was a hoax. If you believed it was not a hoax and you believed the science, wouldn't you hammer on that all the time? Like, wouldn't that be the number one thing you'd say every time you open your mouth? We're all going to die if you elect a Republican, especially Trump, who thinks it's a hoax, because it's the most important thing. It's going to kill us all. The water's going to be up to your nose by Tuesday. If she believed that, you don't think that would come out of her mouth every time she talked? It would be by far the most important thing. By far. But no. And have you noticed that the mainstream news don't really talk about it much compared to how much they did? I mean, keep in mind, that the current president says it's a hoax. And for years, decades, I guess decades, it's been treated as the biggest problem in the world. And now, eh, is it a problem? I don't know. Is it real? Well, it might be real-ish, but it doesn't mean that the downside is going to be bad. Now, you remember that Bill Gates recently changed his emphasis, and he said, climate change is real, but we'll find ways to remediate it, ways to work around it. Probably, well, nobody's going to die too many extra people anyway. So little by little, you're going to see the climate change people just walking it back. Now, is that because the climate models have not predicted? Well, yeah, yeah. If you looked at all the predictions since I was born, they're pretty bad at predicting. And I guess there's finally some acknowledgement that the news is not really accurate, and maybe the science is a little bit hyperbolic, and maybe it's not really backed up by that much science. So if you were on the side of this doesn't look real to me, which is the side I've been on for a long time, have you noticed that reality is starting to conform around me? Has anybody noticed that? Because for years I've been saying this is obviously not true, and I would give my arguments. And now the news is sort of saying, well, yeah, these studies are not that true. Do you remember when I was sort of alone? Not really alone, but there weren't many of us saying that we just have to do nuclear power. There's really no other way around it. We're going to have to go gung ho with nuclear power, not only because it's a green technology, but because if we want to conquer space, you're going to need nuclear and other reasons. And now nuclear is just the biggest thing, and everybody agrees that these new generation of nuclear is we're going to have lots of them. I'll talk more about that, etc. So that's conforming around my view of that. Remember I told you that the war in Ukraine would very quickly be a robot war, robots including drones. Well, there it is. We got a robot war, we've got nuclear power, and we've got climate change that maybe it's not so scary. But is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that some of the biggest factors in the world are all starting to conform around my opinion of what they are? I don't know why. Am I good at predicting, or am I living in some kind of simulation where my opinion is becoming reality? I don't know. But it's getting hard to ignore, isn't it? How often my opinion is matching what you observe, but eventually, not right away. Well, according to a ex-climate alarmist, as he's being called, somebody named Tom Harris, he says that wind turbines, windmills, require fossil fuel backup plants that continuously burn 90% of the time, and that basically that means that the wind turbine is just for show. So this is a guy who used to be an alarmist who now has, I guess, gone to something like my side of it. And he's saying that, I'm not sure exactly what he means, but what I think he means is that since the windmill is not churning all the time, it would have to be paired with something that is churning all the time just so you have energy all the time. So it's hard to believe they don't add anything. But his take is that you're getting literally nothing from a wind turbine because by the time you spend enough money to build the thing and then you put it in, and they've got lots of maintenance problems, and then you need some kind of backup power anyway that's a different kind of power. Once you've looked at the whole picture, Trump is right again. Trump is right. The windmills are a hoax. He got that right too. I'll tell you the one thing that Trump does better than just about anybody is that man can spot bullshit from 1,000 miles away. Now, it could be because he's good at making up his own BS, but wow, is he good at spotting bullshit? I mean, literally, you can see around corners when it comes to that stuff. All right, you know the SNAP program. The SNAP is provides funds for people who can't afford to buy food, and it's a federal program. And the feds asked the states to give them data on the people who receive the SNAP benefits, apparently so that they can do an audit essentially to find out if the people getting it are the people who should be getting it, because it's a lot of money involved. It turns out that 21 states, all Democrat controlled, coincidence, have decided not to give the federal government information on who gets the SNAP benefits. But I think all of the Republican governments have said yes and are cooperating. But what we know is so far, and I'm sure these numbers will grow, the states that did not comply, they found 186,000 dead people with Social Security numbers being used. They found 500,000 people that received that benefits more than twice, and multiple people received benefits in 6 different states. So the SNAP program is just wildly fraudulent, and the Democrats are protecting the frauds. Can you think of any reason that they would not provide that information to the people who are giving them money? If I can give you one piece of advice, if someone gives you money, in this case, the federal government is funding the SNAP program in the states. If somebody's giving you money and then they ask for a little detail about how you're spending it to make sure it's not all being wasted, if you don't give them that information, you're a fraud. There's just no way around it. You're a fraud. Now, you might have some Democrat argument about, oh, if we give you this information, you'll find some way to discriminate against minorities or something. But it just looks like they're protecting fraud. So I'm going to assume that there might be a little bit of a kickback situation where the politicians are getting a little taste of this fraud somehow. Otherwise, they wouldn't be protecting it. But they're very clearly protecting the fraud, Democrats. Meanwhile, MSNBC is reporting that Ken Delanian, who is an NBC guy, is reporting that Letitia James is going to be indicted again. So she was indicted before, but the indictments got dropped because there was a challenge to whether or not the prosecutor was correctly and legitimately appointed. But it didn't create any kind of double jeopardy kind of situation. So they just had to get a prosecutor who was legitimately selected according to everybody, and then they can just go at it again. So Letitia James will not have a good holiday because she is now going to be indicted. In other news, the cost of apartments has gone down 1%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you come in just from October to November, now that doesn't seem like a lot, but if any kind of major cost goes down at all, like ever, that's worth noting because you don't expect them to ever go down. It seems like they would just go up and up and up. And people are quite reasonably saying that the reason that apartment costs are going down is probably not because the supply has increased. As far as I know, there's no reason to think the supply of housing has gone up, right? Especially for rentals. But what has happened is that 2.5 million people have been deported and they all live somewhere. They weren't living on the street. So competition for rentals, the kind of thing that you would expect non-residents to be in, they'd be more likely to be in a rental buying a house. So probably this is the first sign of the Trump administration's deportation, creating an economic benefit for, at least in terms of lowering costs. Don't know that that's why it is. It might be 1% could also be just a noisy data. So it's possible that this won't hold up for another month, but I think it might. In other news, that Biden era fuel rule. So Biden had created a set of standards where you had to have your car on average. On average, you'd have to get 51 miles per gallon if you had a gas car that you were selling. It would have to reach that standard. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like if they could have done that, they would have already done it. So some people were thinking that that standard would have made it essentially impossible to sell a gas car in the United States by what year? I forget what year, but it's within 10 years, I think. And Trump administration just got rid of that. So now you can get an electric car if you want one, but it would now be affordable to get another gas-powered car if that's what you want. So that should also lower the costs compared to what they would have been of automobiles. So rent might be stabilizing, maybe a little bit down. Automobiles might be stabilizing and maybe at some point go down. Jensen Huang, who's the head of NVIDIA, was on Joe Rogan's show, and he said a whole bunch of interesting things. So I'm just going to mention some of them. They're in video clips all over X. You said basically he gave Trump all kinds of credit for making it possible for the AI industry to explode as it has. And he said his point is we need energy growth. Without energy growth, we can have no industrial growth. So Jensen is very complimentary about Trump's understanding of the economics of AI and how important it is, and how, as president, he needed to get rid of as many obstacles as possible. And the biggest obstacle is energy. So Jensen says that in the next 6 to 7 years, you're going to see a bunch of small nuclear reactors. We will all be power generators, just like somebody's farm. So yes, and that would be directly a Trump administration success, because the Trump administration is very much understanding that they need to get rid of all kinds of obstacles to creating power, and that the only way we'll be able to onshore and have a huge manufacturing base is if we just go wild with making more power. And so far, it's looking like Trump and his people have made that possible. So the gigantic boom that you're seeing in our economy, which seems to be limited very much to the AI robot world, we finally have a administration that is completely compatible with that. I don't think that the Trump administration is fighting with that industry in any way. If they are, let me know. I'm not aware of any. But they seem to be completely on board on, you need a lot of energy. We need to get out of the way. We need to make it easier. Go make some energy. So that's pretty exciting. What the most fun story that Jensen Huang said, again, CEO of NVIDIA, he was on Joe Rogan's show. And he told a story about the first customer for NVIDIA's first AI specialty board and chips, I guess. And they built this board and they couldn't find anybody to buy it. So he had a product that became the beginning of the entire AI boom. And he's just sitting there and like nobody knows what it is. Nobody understands it. Nobody wants to buy it. And he ends up talking to Elon Musk. And Elon says, you know what? I've got a company that could use that. And I guess he took Jensen to a little room that was the entire company. It was like this crowded little room. Do you know what company it was? What company was it? It was OpenAI. So it was OpenAI back when Elon thought it would be a nonprofit. But he knew, because he understood the technology, he knew that that board could be, the difference between AI working and not working. So he was the one who created the entire market for AI. If Jensen Huang had not had a conversation with Elon Musk, there would be no AI. Now, I might be exaggerating, but I don't think so. I think that chance encounter and the fact that Elon is smart enough to know what that board could do, but he was also rich enough that he was funding this, AI somewhat, speculative endeavor, and he put the two together, and now the entire economy, the everything, it changed everything. If you were to look at all the things that Elon Musk has done that affected the world, you'd have this long list of everything from, oh my God, he's sending rockets up that are reusable. He's got electric cars and all that. Probably none of it would be as big as this in the long run. Literally, that one guy is the reason that AI is the biggest thing in the world. Now, how could we not know that? I mean, just think about the fact that is just by itself, the fact that he recognized what that board would do and created a market for it and, spawned OpenAI. That is more contribution to civilization than I've ever seen anybody do in any domain. I mean, you'd have to go back to like, Genghis Khan or something to find somebody who changed civilization that much. And we didn't even know about it. How many of you had ever heard that story? I'd never heard it. And it's gigantic. I mean, it's just wildly, wildly impressive. Never even heard the story until today. Anyway, so put that on your resume. And then there's a story that Jensen Huang was telling about the contact he got from the Trump administration when they first got into power. He said that Secretary Lutnick called him, sort of out of the blue, and he said this. He said he told me what was important to President Trump, which was that the U.S. would bring its manufacturing onshore. So Lutnick is, talking to NVIDIA's head, telling him it's important. And here's what he started the conversation with, according to Jensen. This Lutnick called him, and his first sentence was, he said, "This is Secretary Lutnick, and I just want to let you know that you're a national treasure, and that whenever you need access to the president, the administration, you call us. We're always going to be available to you." Literally, that was his first sentence. Now, I've said to you, I don't know much about Lutnick, but I'm kind of intuiting from the things we see him do that he's not ordinary. Like he's the real deal. And, a superstar within the administration. But imagine being so aware that you call NVIDIA and you say, you're a national treasure. If you need anything, you call us and we're going to pick up the phone. How would that feel? I mean, that's pretty impressive because he was right on point, and that was before there was any AI. He could see it coming. And so Jensen says that President Trump single-handedly, flat out saved the AI industry. And primarily it was because of Trump's pro-growth energy policy, because without that, nobody would feel comfortable building a thing that required so much energy and you you didn't have a way to get it. Now there is a way to get it. You can build your own power plant, and you'll find a way to get approval. And then Jensen Huang of NVIDIA had some comments about meeting Trump and how different he is when you actually meet him in person. Now, see if this sounds familiar. Has anybody else said this? That when he met Trump in person, he said he, quote, he surprised me. First of all, he's an incredibly good listener. Have you ever heard that before? That he's an incredibly good listener? That's almost the first thing I said after I met him. So in 2018, I met Trump in the Oval Office and got to chat with him a little bit. And I came away with exactly the same impression. I was like, oh my God, he's such a good listener. He asks questions, right? So the first of all, but if somebody asks questions, that shows interest, and then he really listens, and then he interacts, with your answer, so he's engaged, and he's totally focused on you when you're giving the answer, and you feel it. It's a hell of a superpower. But I'm happy to know that it wasn't just my own impression. It seems like everybody who meets him, I think Bill Maher said something similar, that you don't expect it, but he's just a really good listener, and that's just a superpower because everybody appreciates it. Anyway, so on another topic, Trump says that the big beautiful bill is going to give some deductions, tax deductions for the middle class. So if you borrow money to buy a car, now with the new rules, you're allowed to deduct the interest from your income tax. So it's only the interest. And I think you have to have a loan to make this possible. And Trump says that's going to be a big deal. It will be a big deal. Now, the only thing it will make less expensive is the interest on the loan, because you get to write it off. You're not going to get a deal on the price of the car, but the interest on it may be a lot less. But the deductions up to $10,000 annually. So, and I imagine there's probably an income cutoff because he mentioned middle class. So I suppose if you earn too much money, you don't get that. But the middle class will love it. I saw a podcast in which Victor Davis Hanson was talking to Dr. Scott Atlas. I don't know which podcast it was. One of their podcasts. But Victor had an interesting summary of Trump. And I'm just going to repeat it because it's such an interesting way to put it. He said, quote, at one point, Trump was looking at $500 million in fines. They took his name off the ballot in 25 states, raided his home, debanked his wife and son. They impeached him twice and tried him as a private citizen. That would have broken any other person. To which I say, we forget how much peril he was in. Trump was in this situation where you couldn't really go around it. You couldn't avoid it. You couldn't really minimize it. He had one and only one strategy, which looked damn near impossible at the time. The one way he could survive is to become president of the United States against all odds. with all of that hanging over him, he was a convicted felon and, every other accusation and, hundreds of millions of fines. The only way he could stay out of jail, the only way he could recover his reputation, the only way was to become president of the United States, really against all odds. Now, here's the fun part. You know who knew that besides Trump? I did. I knew he had one way out, but so did you. You knew it. You knew that the only way out was directly through it, right through the middle. He had to carve the intestines out of the whole situation and just walk right through the body of it. Short of that, He didn't have a chance. And I don't know about you, but it felt personal to me. Did you have that feeling? It didn't feel like I was watching a show and, oh, there's this person in the news who's got peril. It felt personal. I felt that if he went down, it would be real easy to get to me and other people who talked about the news in not the way that people liked. So that was personal. And so when I would advocate and use social media and try to play with messaging and try to add to, as much as I could, add to his odds of getting elected, I was also fighting for my life. Now, that wouldn't be true of everybody, but I'm a public figure, and I watched the January 6th people being taken down for practically nothing. I watched all of his lawyers being taken down for practically nothing. I watched the destruction of the reputation of everybody around him. And then I got canceled. I got canceled. And do you know what I said when I got canceled? I can't go around this. I can't avoid it. I've got to go right through the fucking middle of it. That's the only way I'm going to get out. So I went through the middle of it. I doubled down. Here I am. So I feel that, we were in this death match and we were sort of in it together. You were helping me as I was trying to help myself, but also help the president and help the country. So I had very high stakes, very high stakes. And it's easy to forget. Once things turn your way and, hey, golden age is happening and I got the president I wanted and he's not going to jail and all that, it's real easy to forget how dangerous that was. The level of peril that we were in. And I definitely shared, a minor, I mean, nothing like what Trump was going through, of course, but I shared that. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I doubled down on the fight. And that turned out to be the right strategy. Anyway, believe it or not, the Washington Post had an article today saying that food prices are actually more affordable if you take into account inflation plus the increase in people's pay. So pay is up a little bit, inflation's a little bit under control, and although food prices might be going up a little bit or flat in some cases, Washington Post wants you to know if you factor everything in, it's a little bit more affordable, relatively speaking. Now, that is a very surprising thing to see in the Washington Post because it's very pro-Trump in its factual basis. But then, even more surprising, ABC ABC kind of went against the Washington Post and their story about the Venezuelan Coke boat and what we're calling the double tap hoax. The double tap hoax. So the idea is that Hegseth is being accused of ordering a second missile to kill the two survivors of the first missile attack of the first cocaine boat. Now, of course, there's a lot of question about the factual situation. We don't know. It sounds like Hegseth wasn't even aware that there were any survivors. But according to ABC News, their version of it is that the survivors climbed back into the boat, which I guess was still floating, and tried to salvage the drugs that had not been blown up. Now, if you climb back in the boat and the boat is still afloat and it still has, I don't know, half of its drugs there, why wouldn't they be allowed to shoot again? That pretty much would be a continuation of what it was that got them missiled in the first place. So if the first missile made sense, the second missile made sense because they had not finished the job. So ABC News is very much supporting the administration's point of view without saying they're doing that, but factually it would support their version that the job wasn't finished. All they did was finish the job, which I think would be completely allowed. I'm no JAG or military guy, but it seems to me that's all you need to know. If if a full boat was a problem, then half a boat was a problem too. So we'll see. And then I saw that Senator Mark Warner was on one of the shows, Morning Joe, I guess, and he said that in many ways the uniformed military may help save us from this president. What? Seriously? A sitting senator is saying in public that the military might be how we save ourselves from this president? Does he not know that sounds like an insurrectionist or a sedition or a coup or something terribly inappropriate? If you're even suggesting in America that you need the military to control your president instead of our current situation where you have a military leader of the military, you have a civilian leader of the military. Um, does he really not know how that sounds? Because to me, it sounds like the worst thing you could ever say in public if you're a sitting senator. I mean, seriously, you name one thing that would be worse than that. He could say something racist, but then that would just be his problem, right? He could say something that's not true, but that would be business as usual for a senator. What could he say that would be worse than suggesting you might need the military to take out the president or somehow control the president? I can't think of anything that would be worse than that. That is the dumbest, most dangerous thing you'll ever hear a senator say. Unfrickin' believable. But it happened. And then I'd like to tell you this story. This one right here that my printer has completely hidden from me. I'll bet it was a good story, but we'll have to go without that today. Meanwhile, Rasmussen Reports, who you should follow on X, they've been following the whole election integrity thing, and especially the Venezuelan Smartmatic connection. Now, because I don't want to be sued, there's nothing I'm going to say next about this story that I know to be true. These are allegations from other people. And apparently, we have some Venezuelan general is in a U.S. jail. And the general, he was a 3-star general in Venezuela. And he was, among other things, he was the director of military intelligence. All right, so that's a pretty serious job. Venezuelan 3-star general, director of military intelligence. And he wrote a letter to Trump saying that the Smartmatic system can be altered, and this is a fact. He said this technology was later exported abroad, according to the United States. So he says that, quote, I do not claim that every election is stolen, but I state with certainty that elections can be rigged with the software. That would be the Smartmatic software, and has been used to do so. Now, why would he be doing that? Now, you can't really trust it, right? You're not going to trust the jailed Venezuelan general. If there were a type of person to not trust, I would say, well, put it at the top of the list. Tim Walz. Anybody who went to Epstein Island. Okay, there are a lot of people you don't want to trust. But somewhere in the top 10 of people you shouldn't trust at all would be a jailed director of military intelligence from Venezuela. So I'm going to say his credibility is as low as you could possibly get. However, and I'm assuming that he's trying to angle for maybe a pardon or something. That I can't imagine why else he'd be doing it. But that doesn't mean it's true. It does mean he was in a position to know if it's true. So I think you could say for certain that he knows whether that's true. what he's saying. And it seems like our FBI or somebody should be talking to him and hooking him up to hook him up to the lie detector and maybe see if they can catch him in some kind of inconsistency or something. But I'd sure like to know if there's anything to it, wouldn't you? Does it feel to you that the election stuff, especially the voting machine stuff, does it feel to you a lot like climate change used to, where you knew there was something wrong, but the entire world seemed to act like there wasn't something wrong, and you just felt like you were in some kind of weird, not real situation? Because I would say to myself, you know, this climate change stuff, how do you not see that this is bullshit? Maybe not every part of it, but isn't it super obvious? And yet, most of the people would be on the side of the thing that looked to me like super obviously fake. Now, I don't have any specific knowledge that our elections were rigged, but I do have this thought, which is a very powerful one. What are the odds that in a world where everything else is corrupt, our elections are the one thing that are not? And that we have electronic voting machines for no reason. No reason. They're not faster, cheaper, easier. In fact, they're worse on everything, as far as I can tell. I'd be willing to be corrected on that, but they appear to be worse at everything except what would be the one thing the electronic voting machines would be better at? Cheating. Cheating. That doesn't mean that's what they're used for, but I can't think of any other reason they would even exist unless you want to use them for cheating. So that doesn't mean American elections were cheated, but the odds that we had used them or somebody had used them to cheat in some other election somewhere else, well, again, to imagine that it hadn't happened would be a pretty big stretch. And to me, it just seems obvious. It just seems super obvious that you just wouldn't even have these machines. We wouldn't even be having the conversation about keeping them unless somebody saw some advantage that they can't say out loud. Are you at all convinced by the fact that nobody who wants to keep electronic voting machines has ever given a reason why to keep them? Nobody, right? If you can find it, send it to me. Send me the article where there's some country or some election entity who says, oh, no, we want the machines because the machines are better for this reason. What is that reason? If you've ever seen them even claim a reason, show it to me. I believe that nobody even tries to make an argument because what are they going to say? It's cheaper? It's not. It's more reliable? It's not. It's faster? It's not. Sort of the dog not barking, wouldn't you say? So again, I have no specific knowledge of anything that was, any rigged elections. I just look at it and I say, I don't know how they could not be rigged. The Trump administration is debuting what they're calling their fentanyl-free America plan. So I guess that would be a variety of actions all aimed at reducing the fentanyl risk. So they're going to try to work on the demand as well as the supply. So the supply part is, blowing up the narco ships, and Trump is teasing, and I think he's somewhat serious about going in on the ground in Venezuela, maybe other places. But one thing I learned today is that the fentanyl in the U.S. May be largely controlled by the Hells Angels in Canada. So I guess the Hells Angels in Canada are sitting somewhere in that distribution. And that's not the biggest surprise in the world, but it does suggest that we have a way to deal with it, because it wouldn't be hard to figure out who's in the Hells Angels, and it probably wouldn't be that hard because they're not the most, let's say, technologically sophisticated. So I would think that we could penetrate their, at least their communications fairly easily. Um, and maybe that'll make a difference. But, there's one thing that maybe I could help on, which is the demand part. Now, if you didn't know this, most of the people who take fentanyl, I think most, let's say, 29% of fentanyl pills contained a potential lethal dose. Jesus. A significant drop from 76% of pills tested 2 years ago. Wow. But if you didn't know it, fentanyl is often in pills that are sold as not being fentanyl. So if you bought a Xanax, for example, on the street, it might look exactly like a Xanax, and it may have been made in a pill machine to look exactly like Xanax, but it might actually have fentanyl in it. So that's the big risk. When people know they're taking fentanyl, they either are experienced at it, which reduces the odds of them overdosing quite a bit. The people who are experienced. But if you're not experienced and you don't know it's in the pill, you're in trouble. My guess is that's what got my stepson. He probably didn't know it was in the pill because he never would have taken a fentanyl pill. I mean, he told me that directly. He would have considered that insane to take a pill that he knew was fentanyl. He wouldn't do it. But he did take a pill, and it must have had some fentanyl in it. And that was not something that he could say no to, apparently. So I was thinking, is there any kind of messaging that would reduce the chance that somebody would take a pill that might have fentanyl in it, but you don't know? And I don't have an answer for it, but I'm going to test this out with you. Don't be a gullible fentanyl victim. Now, this is not a refined message. This is just first draft. So I don't know if this is a good idea, but let me tell you the thinking. Nobody wants to be gullible. If I said to you, don't be a drug addict, I can tell you from lots of life experience that people will say, well, sorry, I am a drug addict. I am. So they'll just say, I am a drug addict. It wouldn't stop them from taking a pill. But if you said that you're a gullible fentanyl victim, nobody wants to be gullible. So even people who are, drug addicts, they like to think that they know what they're doing. Nobody wants to be thought of as gullible. So if you say instead of you're a victim or you're a drug addict, those two things don't motivate anybody. But if I said to you, damn, you're gullible. Seriously? You took a pill that could have had fentanyl and you just believed the person who told you it doesn't have it? That's gullible. So gullible is something that people will actually try not to be. But drug addict, once they are a drug addict, they kind of live with it. It just becomes who they are. But I think gullible is a powerful word. There's no way to know without testing it. But that's the sort of thing that could reduce demand. Yeah, don't be a sucker. But I think gullible maybe even better than sucker. Yeah, sucker's not bad. But I think gullible is worse. All right, works for you? All right. Remember, it might seem to you like this is not a powerful thing, but those of you who saw what happened when I started saying that alcohol is poison, it was just one word, poison. And apparently, some hundreds of people that watched this show cut down or completely stopped alcohol because of one sentence. Alcohol is poison. So I'm not sure if don't be gullible is that strong, but it could be. It could be that strong. All right, Rand Paul's pushing back on the Venezuela narco-boat attacks. Now, I often say this about Rand, and I say this about Thomas Massey as well. When they disagree with me, or they disagree with a policy that I think is a good policy, I don't say to myself, you idiots, or, you selfish guys, or I don't say that. I say, these are smart people and they do mean well and they do want what's best for the country. If they have a different opinion on stuff, I stop and listen. I might still disagree, as I do with Rand Paul on this topic, but I have complete respect for the fact that they're willing to present, a sincere and well expressed alternate view. That is really useful, even if you disagree, because you know what you're disagreeing with some specificity. Okay. So Rand Paul thinks that he says about the narco-boats, if they're armed, show us who they're armed. Show us who they're armed. Well, I guess prove to us that they're armed. If they're not armed, explain to us why we kill people who are not armed. Now that's a reasonably good pushback. So it sounds like he's saying if they're not an immediate threat, why are you killing them? Because it would need to be an immediate threat. Now, where I disagree is that I think allowing them to live and even allowing other people to think the risk is low if they do the same kind of boat thing, I think those are immediate risks. And I think that the weapon is the drug. So when he says, show me that they're armed, that's the big tanks of drugs. And you can see in the pictures that they have these big blue tanks. They're quite obviously full of drugs because those big blue tanks are exactly what they ship drugs in. So if you believe, as I do, that the drugs are the weapon, and you believe that that they're definitely going to cause overdoses if they make it to the mainland, that's good enough for me. But I absolutely respect and appreciate that Rand Paul is doing a good job of steel manning the side of being better people, I guess. Maybe in his view. So good job, Rand Paul. I just respectfully disagree. Apparently, Maduro, head of Venezuela, is asking OPEC to help him survive, essentially. And it looks like OPEC's not going to give him a good answer. But I would say that this is pretty good evidence that Maduro is running out of options. If he thought that appealing to OPEC was going to help him, that was sort of a Hail Mary, right? If your best play is to try to get OPEC involved, I mean, really, he would have to get Saudi Arabia involved, or else nothing's going to happen. And Saudi is good friends with the Trump administration and Trump in particular, and there's just no way. The Saudis don't get involved in this sort of thing smartly. They wisely don't get involved. So I would say there's no real chance that OPEC is going to, sort of weigh in and try to influence Trump on this. I think they'll just stay out of it. But the fact that Maduro thinks this is one of his options means he's out of options. So it would suggest that something might be happening soon because he's got no plays, no cards. I saw Mike Cernovich talking about Trump's pardons that he's issuing, and some of those pardons look a little bit of a head scratcher to even his supporters. So Mike Cernovich says, I voted for Trump. He said this on X. I voted for Trump, drove support for him, and I'm glad each day I did. The pardons will be his downfall if this isn't handled immediately. And he, in a separate post, he'd made an appeal for someone who was in the administration to see if they can maybe dial back some of these sketchy pardons that are coming out. Now, Mike Cernovich is one of these valuable voices. Even if you don't agree with him, you want to hear what he has to say, because that will be a valuable, stake in the ground. And you might not agree with all of it, but you should be better off by knowing what that point of view is. So I agree that I am uncomfortable with some of the recent pardons because there doesn't seem to be a pattern to them. And without seeing the pattern, you have to wonder what's going on. So it doesn't look like it's just for humanitarian reasons. It doesn't look like just because they were unfairly treated, although Trump tends to say that about his pardons, they were unfairly treated. That doesn't mean that's why he did it. But there's also no obvious reason for some of the pardons. So I'm left to speculate. My speculation goes like this: there's something that Trump or the administration or the country is getting in return. I'm guessing information, because I don't think Trump would do pardons for money. Because, I mean, how much money could anybody pay for a pardon? If you're Joe Biden and you can get $1 million for a pardon, well, you probably do it, because $1 million would be real money for the Biden family. But would $1 million be anything for Trump? Not really. $1 million? And how much do you think anybody would pay? Is somebody going to pay $1 billion for a pardon? Probably not. So I don't think it's about money. It doesn't really, it doesn't really, light up any bells for me. Light up any bells? Doesn't light up any lights. I just don't feel like it could be about money. Although if it were someone else, I might say maybe, somebody who didn't have as much money. So if it's not about money and we can't see any other pattern to it, what is it about? Here's my best guess. There must be something, and when I say must, I should change that to might. There might be something that these particular people know or have access to or can control that Trump needs to know or control. So it's probably about someone else. And it could be something along the lines of, if I pardon you, do you think you would tell us who did this? If I pardon you, do you think you would show us or tell us where to look to, I don't know, get some extra control over Venezuela, or to learn what bad behavior happened during the Biden administration, or something like that? So, but I'm very much with Cernovich on the fact that we don't know why these pardons are happening, and they don't look legit. They don't look necessarily corrupt, not necessarily. We're just left with the mystery, and I think we'll keep it that way. Now, whenever these kind of sketchy pardons happen, somebody always brings up, well, maybe it shouldn't be legal to pardon anybody. And I don't love that idea, because there are going to be times when a pardon is the thing that creates justice. Not most of the time, but it's, sometimes, and that's valuable. So, but if you're going to allow pardons at all, you have to live with the fact that they're not going to always be ones you like. And indeed, probably most of them will be ones you hate. So if you think pardons should be a thing, you have to live with a little bit of discomfort if you're observing it. And I have a little bit of discomfort. Well, actually, more than a little bit. The recent pardons, they really raise some questions. But since I don't distrust Trump, in the sense that I don't think he's selling it, there must be something he's getting out of it, because he doesn't leave free money on the table. Let me put it this way. Trump would know that he's going to get pushback from these sketchy looking pardons, but he did it anyway. Does he ever leave money on the table that other people could pick up? Because this would be just money that his enemies could pick up. He's just giving them an easy shot. Oh, look, I did a sketchy pardon. And then they're going to make, days of headlines about it. So when does Trump ever do something where he's just giving away money? In this case, money being not literally money. He never does. So we have to assume that he or the country or the administration are getting something in return. And I don't think it's money. So we'll see. Maybe we'll never know. Well, Microsoft has dropped its AI sales targets because people were not being able to sell them. Who would have guessed that? I would. So from the beginning, fairly early on, I've been saying that AI is a little bit overdone, a little bit overrated, and that it's hard for me to imagine that people will buy it when it hallucinates. And I've got a feeling that was Microsoft's problem. Hey, we've got this AI agent that will change everything in your company. Why don't you buy it? Does it hallucinate? What? Does it hallucinate? Stop mumbling. Does it hallucinate? Yes. Well, I don't want it. I imagine that's how the sales calls go. That as soon as you find out it hallucinates, and as soon as you find out that it would be dangerous or you wouldn't want to connect it to your other apps, what does it do? If it doesn't give you the truth reliably and you can't connect it to your other apps and trust it, I don't know. I don't know what market value it has, honestly. So I'm not surprised that they had to knock back their sales expectations. Oh, I'm going way too long today. There's some new drones in Ukraine and blah blah blah. We're putting some German company is putting in space a little mission to build solar arrays to do manufacturing in space. So they're actually moving on the idea of having manufacturing in space. So they're doing some experiments to see what they need to do. So that's actually happening. And now 1 in 3 students at top colleges are claiming to be disabled to get extra time to complete exams. But they're claiming their disabilities are ADHD and depression. All right, that's all I got for you. I'm going to say a few words privately to the beloveds, subscribers on Locals, if you're still with me. The rest of you, thanks for hanging in there. And I will talk to you tomorrow, the rest of you. And in 30 seconds, I'll be private with the Locals subscribers.